To understand this further, I want to bring to the show now Senior Director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery. Admiral, this is obviously a devastating day for at least two families, two U.S. soldiers killed, one civilian translator. Also, NewsNation just learning that this attack took place in an area, as Hannah pointed out, where the Syrian president does not have control. Initial assessments show the attack was likely carried out by ISIS. What do you know, and what do we know about ISIS control in the region, and what does that mean for American security at home and certainly abroad?
Well, thank you for having me. And yet, we've had forces in Syria for over a decade now doing this kind of mission where, trying to hold foreign terrorist organizations accountable, preventing them from taking control of territory. I'm not sure it's fair to say that ISIS controls this territory. I think it's probably better to describe it as uncontrolled territory, where the United States is working with Syrian partner forces to try to eliminate terrorist organizations like ISIS. And there's multiple organizations in this area. You may recall we lost some soldiers to a drone attack about 2 years ago, right on the border of Jordan and Syria. So this isn't our first combat casualties. And this is the risk you take when you're fighting, when you're forward deployed like this, trying to engage the adversary on their territory to prevent them from coming to the United States.
Obviously this news is just breaking in the last hour or so, but I'm curious, do you think, based on what we know so far, the attacker was targeting Americans, or was this potentially a situation where U.S. troops were just caught in crossfire between Syrian forces and possibly ISIS terrorists?
So if it's truly a lone shooter, then I think they're targeting U.S. forces. I think that's a reasonable conclusion to draw. If it had been, a full unit, attempting to engage, U.S. partner forces, then possibly we're in a crossfire. But I think that's highly unlikely. From the description we have so far, it certainly sounds like the U.S. would be targeted, that someone had prior knowledge of U.S. forces coming for this key leader engagement and staged an ambush.
What do you make of this attack on U.S. forces coming just as the U.S. and Syria relations, those have been warming, as Hannah was kind of pointing out there, after Assad's fall?
Well, what's unique about this is the U.S., cooperation with the Syrian government now since Assad's fall and the new leadership taking over in Damascus. So, I think this is a natural extension of the president's desire to partner with the new Syrian president, and the United States being involved there is something that has been hotly debated, and President Trump wasn't always for U.S. forces being in Syria. But there is a very logical argument for U.S. forces being forward here, trying to eliminate these sort of foreign terrorist organizations before they can create problems for the United States in the United States.
I mentioned to Hannah there, we're keeping a close eye to see if the president responds to the public following these attacks. But what do you make, or what do you think the president's response will be? Do you think that a proportional response is something we could expect in terms of military forces?
I mean, certainly something we could do is increase the aggressiveness of our attacks on known ISIS positions or suspected ISIS positions in Syria. And certainly the wrong attitude would be to step back. When your forces are attacked like this, if you step back, you encourage further attacks. So the right stance is going to be to determine who did this, where they're located, and then hold them accountable.
Should the U.S., troops abroad and potentially even on the ground here, but particularly in the Middle East, be on high alert right now? We're talking about this potentially being a standalone attack. Do you really think that's the case here?
So I suspect our forces in Syria, the small numbers of highly trained forces there, are always on high alert. I don't think that this is a case of the U.S. not paying attention. I think they're always on high alert. I mean, clearly, it looks like there was some sort of pre-knowledge of U.S. movements, which is, always puts you at further risk. And then there's an attack. So I wouldn't attribute this to not being on high alert. And I know you weren't, but I think the stated position is U.S. forces in Syria and in Jordan are always on high alert.
Yeah. I guess I'm asking, though, moving forward, if this is not a standalone attack, I think that's the kind of the messaging we're starting to hear, but obviously this is very early. Do you anticipate or are concerned about further attacks that would have to put troops on further alert if there's a level higher than where things are at right now?
Well, sure. I mean, and then if we decide to hold them accountable, we'll obviously bring in the proper forces to do that, temporarily, and conduct the short campaign, and then step back to the pre-existing conditions, force levels and such. So my guess is you're right. There'll be an increase in force posture, some kind of event, and then once we feel we've done, sent the right message, held the right people accountable, we'll step back.
We know that Syria's previous government has really close ties to Russia. Do you think Putin or remnants of the Assad regime may in some way, shape, or form be linked to this attack?
They weren't in cahoots with ISIS, so I don't think so. But you don't know, and a lot of work needs to be done on this to determine who this assailant was. Obviously the fact that he's now dead makes it slightly harder, but not completely harder to forensically determine who he was working with and what his goals and objectives were. Yeah. Russia's been a bad actor in Syria for several decades, and they're one of the root causes of the problems we have in Syria these days. But I wouldn't hold them accountable for this just yet.
I'm sure these are some of the questions that are being asked, in Washington, D.C. right now. So I'm glad I get a chance to ask them to you. What about Iran, right? Given that ISIS is now believed to be behind this attack, what happens if any ties between Iran and those responsible for this attack are found?
Well, we'll have to see if this person belonged to an IRGC, Iranian Revolutionary Guard, affiliated group. If he was, then that will increase the number of people we need to hold accountable. And I will tell you, there's a lot of IRGC proxy forces in Syria. There's remnants of them in Syria, in Iraq. And Iran certainly looks for any opportunity to inflict pain on the United States. But until we have that proper connection done, you don't want to make it ahead of time. But if you do, then you hold Iran accountable as well.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see and get that information. But to your point, there is a reaction that needs to happen. You don't want to react too fast and too harsh before all the information is gotten. We're certainly looking forward to getting some of that information, but really appreciate you giving us some insight. Senior Director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.